The Riverside Ballroom smelled like money and desperation. That particular mix of expensive perfume, champagne bubbles, and the anxiety of people trying to impress each other. I'd been standing near the bar for 45 minutes, nursing a glass of Pinot Noir that had gone warm in my hand, watching my sister work the room like she'd been born for it. Brooke had always been good at this. The center of attention thing. Even as kids, she'd had that quality that made people turn toward her, like flowers tracking the sun. Tonight, she was radiant in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her left hand perpetually raised at the perfect angle to catch the light. The ring really was beautiful. 2 carats, platinum setting, cushion cut. She'd told the proposal story at least 12 times since I'd arrived, and I'd heard fragments of it drifting across the room. The rooftop restaurant, the string quartet, the way Marcus had gotten down on one knee just as the sun set over the harbor. My parents stood beside her like proud satellites, orbiting her glow. My mother kept touching the ring, examining it from different angles, asking questions about the jeweler with the intensity of someone studying for an exam. My father had his arm around Marcus, already treating him like the son he'd never had. I took another sip of my wine. It really had gone too warm. A waiter passed with a tray of stuffed mushrooms, and I grabbed 2, mostly for something to do with my hands. I'd already congratulated Brooke when I arrived, hugged her, admired the ring, told her I was happy for her, all the things a good sister does. She thanked me with that distracted smile she always wore around me, like she was already looking past my shoulder for someone more interesting to talk to. I wasn't bitter about it. Not anymore. You can only be bitter about something for so long before it just becomes the texture of your life, the background noise you stop noticing. The ballroom doors opened, and Uncle James walked in. He looked tired from traveling, his suit slightly rumpled from the flight, but his face broke into that familiar warm smile when he spotted our family cluster across the room. James was my father's younger brother, though they couldn't have been more different. Where my father was all rigid formality and measured words, James had this easy warmth that made everyone around him relax. He'd moved to San Francisco 15 years ago to chase the tech boom, and he'd caught it. Venture capital, early investments in companies whose names were now household words. But money hadn't changed him the way it changes some people. He still called me every few weeks, still remembered my birthday, still asked questions about my life and actually listened to the answers. "Sorry I'm late, everyone," he said, making his way through the crowd. "Flight was delayed 3 hours. You know how it is." He hugged Brooke first, the proper order of things, shook Marcus's hand, said something that made him laugh, embraced my mother, kissed her cheek, clapped my father on the shoulder. Then he turned to me and his whole face changed, softened into something genuine. "Sophia." He pulled me into a real hug, the kind where you actually feel the other person's presence. "God, it's good to see you. You look incredible." "Thanks, Uncle James. How was the flight?" "Terrible, but worth it." He pulled back, studying my face the way he always did, like he was checking to make sure I was really okay. "So tell me, how's life in that gorgeous house of yours? Is the neighborhood everything you hoped? I've been thinking about that mountain view ever since I stayed with you last spring." The words hung in the air. I watched them land, watched the confusion ripple across my mother's face, the way my father's champagne flute stopped halfway to his lips, watched Brooke's hand freeze mid-gesture, the ring catching the light one final time before everything shifted. The conversations around us didn't exactly stop, but they quieted, pulled back, like the room itself was holding its breath. "James?" My father's voice was tight, controlled. "What house?" Uncle James looked between us, and I saw the moment he realized his mistake. The color drained from his face, then rushed back. He glanced at me, a question in his eyes. I gave him the smallest nod. "It's okay. Let it come." "The house on Sterling Heights," James said slowly, his voice more careful now. "The Craftsman Sophia bought back in 2016, the one with the mountain views." My mother made a small sound, not quite a gasp, more like the air leaving her lungs against her will. "Sophia doesn't own a house," Brooke said. Her voice had that edge it always got when something didn't fit her understanding of the world. "She rents that apartment near the university, the one with the weird neighbor who plays drums." I took a slow sip of my warm wine. Let the moment stretch. "I rented that apartment for 2 years," I said quietly, "during my PhD program. Then I bought the house. That was 8 years ago. The silence that followed was remarkable, complete. Like someone had pressed mute on the entire ballroom, though of course the party continued around us, oblivious to the small earthquake happening in our corner. My father set his champagne flute down on a nearby table with exaggerated care. "I don't understand. Where would you get the money for a house? Sterling Heights that's an expensive neighborhood." "I put down $240,000 and financed the rest," I said. "Though I paid off the mortgage about 6 years ago." "Paid off the mortgage," my mother repeated. The words came out hollow, like she was translating from a foreign language. Uncle James had recovered from his initial shock. He accepted a fresh champagne flute from a passing server, took a long sip, and nodded. "Sophia's always been smart with money. That signing bonus from Helix, she put almost the whole thing toward the principal. Knocked out most of the debt in 2 years." "What signing bonus?" My father's voice cracked on the last word. "What's Helix?" I realized then, with a clarity that felt almost physical, that my father didn't know where I worked. He knew I was in pharmaceutical research, that much had penetrated, but the actual details had never stuck, had never mattered enough to remember. "Helix Pharmaceuticals," I said. "I've worked there for 7 years. When they recruited me out of my postdoc, they offered a $150,000 signing bonus. I used it to pay down the mortgage." Brooke's perfectly composed face was starting to fracture. "That's not, signing bonuses aren't..." She stopped, recalibrated. "How much do they pay you?" "My current compensation is around $340,000 annually. Base salary, performance bonuses, stock options." The number landed like a physical blow. I watched it hit each of them differently. My mother's hand flew to her throat. My father went very still, the way he did when he was processing something that threatened his worldview. Brooke's mouth opened and closed without sound. Somewhere behind us, a champagne flute shattered on the marble floor. Several guests turned to look, but the sound barely registered. "That's more than..." Brooke started, then stopped. "More than Marcus makes," she'd been about to say. I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes, the rapid reassessment of hierarchies she'd always taken for granted. "The pharmaceutical industry pays well for specialized research," I said, "especially in oncology." "Oncology." My father said the word like he was tasting it. "You research cancer?" I waited for the punchline. The moment where he'd smile and say, "Of course I know that. I was just surprised about the house." But it didn't come. He was genuinely asking. "I'm the director of oncology research," I said carefully. "I oversee a team of about 40 researchers. We develop drug delivery systems for cancer treatment." "Director," my mother whispered, "of research." "The work is promising," Uncle James added, and I could tell he was trying to help, trying to fill the gaps in a way that might soften the blow. "Sophia's team is in phase 3 trials for a pancreatic cancer drug. If it works, it could help a lot of people." "The FDA gave us breakthrough therapy designation last month," I said. "It fast-tracks the approval process. We're cautiously optimistic." The information kept landing, one piece after another, and I watched my parents try to absorb it. They looked like people who'd walked into what they thought was their living room and found themselves in a foreign country. "You've never mentioned any of this," my mother said. Her voice had a plaintive quality now, almost accusatory. "I have, actually, multiple times. I think we would remember..." "Thanksgiving 2018, I said quietly. "I told you about the house. Dad said I was probably overextending myself financially and should be careful with debt. Mom asked if I was sure I could handle the maintenance without a husband to help. My mother's face went pale. Easter 2019. I mentioned paying off the mortgage. You asked if that meant I'd lost my job, if I needed money. I never said, April 2021. I tried to tell you about the breakthrough designation for our first drug candidate. You interrupted to ask Brooke about her promotion to senior account manager. The specificity of the memories seemed to wound them more than the revelations themselves. I hadn't planned to recite this list. I'd kept these moments in a private folder in my mind, evidence I'd accumulated without meaning to, proof that I wasn't imagining things. My father's jaw tightened. You're saying we ignored you. I'm saying you didn't listen. There's a difference maybe, but the result is the same. Brooke found her voice again, defensive now. Well, maybe if you actually talked about your life instead of being so secretive all the time. I wasn't secretive, I said. I was just quiet. And you filled the silence with yourself? The accusation hung between us. Brooke's eyes went bright with sudden tears. Whether from hurt or anger or embarrassment, I couldn't tell. That's not fair, she said. I can't help it if I have things going on in my life. Neither can I said gently. The difference is, I never expected you to care about mine. A woman approached our group, breaking the tension with her smile. It took me a moment to place her, Dr. Rachel Santos, a colleague from a conference 2 years ago. She worked at a research hospital downtown and apparently knew someone at the party. Sophia, I didn't expect to see you here. She touched my arm warmly. Congratulations on the nature medicine piece. My whole department was talking about it. Groundbreaking work, really. Thank you, Rachel. That's kind. Nature medicine? My father said faintly. It's a journal, I explained. They published an article about our research last month. Not just an article, Rachel corrected. A feature. With that quote calling your work potentially transformative for oncology treatment protocols. She must have sensed the strange energy in our group because her smile faltered slightly. Anyway, I won't interrupt. Just wanted to say hello. Lovely party. She drifted away and the silence rushed back in. My mother had tears running down her cheeks now. She made no move to wipe them away. Sophia, I don't understand. How can you have done all these things, achieved all this, and we didn't know? Because you never asked. The words came out softer than I'd intended. Every phone call, every visit, every holiday, the conversation was always about Brooke. Her job, her apartment, her relationships. I tried to share things about my life, but there was never room. That's not true, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Uncle James set down his champagne. When was the last time you asked Sophia about her research? Her home? Anything about her actual life? The question hung in the air. I watched my parents search their memories, watched them come up empty. I can tell you exactly when, I said. 6 years ago at Thanksgiving. I started explaining my work on nanoparticle delivery systems, and after about 2 minutes, Dad interrupted to ask Brooke about her vacation plans. My father's face crumpled. For a moment, he looked old, really old, in a way I'd never noticed before. I'm sorry, my mother whispered. I'm so sorry, Sophia. For what exactly? The question wasn't meant to be cruel, but she flinched like I'd struck her. For failing to... She couldn't finish the sentence. We love you, my father said roughly. We love both our daughters equally. Do you? I asked. Can you tell me what company I work for, what my job title is, where I live, anything about my actual daily life? The silence stretched. My father opened his mouth, closed it again. My mother sobbed openly now, not caring who saw. From the corner of my eye, I saw Brooke walking toward the balcony doors. Her fiancé Marcus hesitated, looking between her retreating figure and our family cluster, then followed her out into the night. What do you want from us, Sophia? My father asked finally. His voice was rough with something I couldn't identify. Guilt, maybe, or the first stirrings of real grief. I considered the question carefully. A year ago, I would have had answers, recognition, pride, the simple acknowledgement that I existed as a full person with a full life. But somewhere along the way, I'd stopped wanting those things, stopped needing them. Nothing, I said, and realized it was true. I wanted you to be interested in my life. I wanted you to see me, but I stopped wanting that a few years ago. I had to, for my own sanity. It's not too late, my mother pleaded. We can start over. Can you? I asked gently. Or do you just want access to your successful daughter now that you know she's worth bragging about? Because that's not a relationship, Mom. That's just a different kind of using. The accusation landed hard. My mother's face twisted with pain. My father looked away, toward the windows, toward anything but me. That's not fair, he said quietly. Maybe not. But I spent 8 years trying to be fair, trying to understand, to forgive, to keep showing up. At some point, I had to protect myself. A text message buzzed on my phone. I glanced at it. Brooke, you couldn't let me have one night? I slipped the phone back into my purse without responding. I'm going to leave, I said. This is Brooke's engagement party. She deserves to have it be about her. Sophia, please, my mother started. We'll talk later, I said. When you've had time to process, when we can have a real conversation instead of a scene. I hugged Uncle James, whispered my thanks, and walked toward the exit. My heels clicked against the marble floor, a steady rhythm that carried me past the catering staff, past the coat check, past the elegant lobby with its crystal chandeliers. Behind me, I heard my mother call my name once. I didn't turn around. The drive to Sterling Heights took 23 minutes. I knew because I counted every one of them, using the familiar rhythm of traffic lights and turns to settle my racing heart. Uncle James had caught up with me in the parking lot, his breath fogging in the cool night air. You okay, kiddo? I'd considered the question carefully. I think so. That was harder than I expected. You handled it beautifully, calm, honest, dignified. Everything they needed to hear, even if they didn't want to. They're going to call, I said. Tonight? Tomorrow. They're going to want to fix this. Probably. He'd put his hands in his pockets, looked up at the stars barely visible through the city lights. But you don't owe them an easy reconciliation, Sophia. You've spent years trying to be seen. If they want a relationship now, they need to do the work. What if they can't? Then you'll be fine. His voice was firm, certain in a way that made me want to believe him. You have a career that matters, financial security, meaningful work that helps people. You have friends who appreciate you, colleagues who respect you. You don't need parents who only value you once they learn your net worth. I knew he was right. But knowing something and feeling it are different countries, and I wasn't sure I had a passport for both. Now, pulling into my driveway, I sat for a moment with the engine off, looking at my house. The porch light was on. I'd set it on a timer years ago so I'd never come home to darkness. The craftsman details I'd fallen in love with at the first showing. The mountain view I'd paid a premium for, visible even now as shadows against the night sky. I'd found this house during the most difficult period of my postdoc, when I was working 16-hour days and barely sleeping. The real estate agent had thought I was wasting her time, a 29-year-old graduate student looking at houses in Sterling Heights. But I'd done the math. I knew what I was worth, even if no one else did. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. The kitchen where I'd taught myself to cook during the lonely pandemic months. The living room with its built-in bookshelves filled with medical journals and novels and the trashy romance paperbacks I'd never admit to reading. The home office where I'd written papers that had been cited hundreds of times, where I'd had video calls with researchers from Tokyo and London and Sao Paulo. My phone buzzed again, Mom calling. I set it on the kitchen counter, face down, and poured myself a glass of water. The house was quiet in the way I'd come to love. Not empty, just peaceful. I walked through the rooms slowly, letting my fingers trail along surfaces I'd chosen, walls I'd painted, furniture I'd saved for and bought with cash. The guest room where Uncle James stayed during his visits. The small bedroom I'd converted into a reading nook with its oversized chair and the window that caught the morning light perfectly. In my office, the desk was covered with printouts from our latest trial data, promising results, numbers that might mean something to patients and families and doctors we'd never meet. This was what I'd chosen with my life. Not wealth or recognition, but work that mattered. The money was nice, but it wasn't the point. The point was the research, the slow accumulation of knowledge that might someday help someone live a little longer. I sat in my desk chair and looked at the framed patent certificates on the wall. 7 of them now, though only 4 were really significant. Quiet achievements that no one in my family had ever asked about. My phone buzzed again. Dad this time. Then a text from Brooke. We need to talk. I didn't respond to any of them, not yet. Tomorrow there would be conversations, probably tears, accusations, attempts at explanation. My mother would want to understand. My father would want to fix things. Brooke would want to be angry before she could be anything else. But tonight was mine. I changed into comfortable clothes, made myself tea, and sat on my back porch looking at the stars. The same stars Uncle James had looked at in the parking lot, though they were clearer here, away from the city lights. For years, I'd carried a small, sharp grief about my family. The pain of being overlooked, of shouting into a void, of loving people who couldn't quite see you. I'd learned to live around it, the way you learn to live around a chronic injury. Carefully, with awareness, making accommodations. But sitting here now, in the house I'd bought with my own money, at the end of a night that had finally cracked everything open, I realized the grief had changed shape. It wasn't sharp anymore. It was just sad. The quiet sadness of accepting that some things couldn't be fixed, only survived. I didn't hate my parents. I didn't even hate Brooke, though her text had stung in a familiar way. They were flawed people who'd built a flawed family, and I was part of it, and I'd found my way out anyway. The tea cooled in my hands, the stars wheeled slowly overhead. Tomorrow, I would answer their calls. I would listen to their apologies, their explanations, their promises to do better. I would decide how much of myself I was willing to offer them and how much I needed to keep protected. But tonight, I sat in the home I'd built, surrounded by a life I'd created through my own work and will and stubborn persistence, and I let myself feel the full weight of what I'd accomplished, without them, despite them. In the end, because of me.